on the block, Anand here, Anand Chandrasekharan. Very interesting company. I had, when I first heard about them and then kept track of them, I told Akila we must have them in some session or the other. He is a neuroscientist by qualification and training, IIT Madras, but neuroscientist, neuromorphic engineer is what he's. Now what he's doing with business, is he out of his mind? We'll find out from him, because he will tell us how the neurons fire and how he become an entrepreneur. So he recently raised a $1.5 million round just about a couple of months ago from 2 funds. And congratulations to you, Anand, on that. He also got a baby a few months ago. So many things are being raised in his life right now. So we will understand from Anand what it takes to be an early stage investee company, how did he go about all that process, etc. He will first talk about it a bit. Then we have somebody like Vineet, hotel management guy from Lucknow. And then years later he did IIM Calcutta MBA. He has multiple hats. He's an angel investor with Chennai Angels along with me. That's one. He also runs a preschool chain which he franchises to several places. He also runs Nawab Sheikh, a chain of restaurants which he wants to take nationwide. He also is a co-founder of a healthcare BPO, while he was also working somewhere else in some other company, Apollo Health Street, among other places and all that. So we want to understand from him, how the chameleon changes its colors as it moves from being investor to franchisor to franchisee to investee. So Vineet will share with us how he becomes different creatures in all this, and what it takes to be on different sides. As Jairam Ramesh very famously once said, where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit in the Lok Sabha. If you are in opposition, you take one stand. If you are in the government, you take another stand. So he's sitting right now. We'll see where he stands. And finally, we have Srini, who again is very interesting. He's a corporate executive. He worked with A.V. Thomas, etc. He's also had an entrepreneurial stint. He had a BPO company which called Matrix, which he sold to Aditya Birla Group. And then swiftly he turned over like Voldemort to the other side. He became part of a fund called Venture East. And today he also helps in deal evaluation and managing the portfolio of the company post-investment. So we'll try to understand from him what it takes to invest in companies, what his own experience also a little bit. But the focus will be on his portfolio of investments. So let me start off with the newbie, Anand, saying a few words about his journey. And then we'll jump into questions. We have a 1 hour 15-minute session. We close at 11:15. If anybody wants coffee before that, put up your hands or put a time out. I will heed your request. If you have any questions, you can raise your hands in between. We'll be happy to answer some of the questions in between also. But ideally, I'd like to park it towards the last 20 minutes. Thank you, and over to you, Anand.
Hi. So, a brief overview about us, I guess, and our journey towards Madras. By the way, it's Madras, it's not Chennai. I refuse to call it Chennai. I grew up in a city called Madras, and I will not call it Chennai ever. As he mentioned, started off at IIT Madras doing electrical engineering, and that was going nowhere. So midway, I kind of changed streams, fell in love with a subject called neuroscience, the study of the brain, and went on to do my PhD in neuroscience at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. Then went to Stanford, did my postdoc there, where I was building brains in silicon, essentially. So designing silicon chips that could emulate the brain. As opposed to some of my colleagues over there who went on into IBM research and stuff like that to continue building those kind of chips, I decided to go into Silicon Valley and join a startup doing neural computation kind of stuff, DARPA contracts, US defense kind of stuff, pattern recognition. That's kind of my background. So mostly academic, always about deep neural computation related problems. And it was around this time that I decided, okay, I've built up a pretty strong intuition about how brains work and how they should be built. And I want to build brains myself and build a strong artificial intelligence company. And that's where my co-founder, Ashwini, steps in. So Ashwini and I, husband and wife team. She's been working at Intel for around a decade at that point. And of most relevance, for the last several years, she'd been heading up mobile innovations, deep inside Intel Labs. So this is a very multidisciplinary team, computer scientists, ethnographers, machine learning scientists, all of those kind of people trying to come together to build context-aware technology. Essentially, take machine learning and artificial intelligence and try to build products out of that deep inside Intel Labs. The problem, of course, is that very few of those kind of projects see the light of day. And so it seemed perfect. So I was leaving academia and hardcore research, and I wanted to build things that were useful. She had been trying to build things that were useful, unfortunately stuck in an organization where it's hard to get things out. It doesn't matter which organization it is. In a pretty large company, it's pretty hard to get that kind of technology out there. So we decided to do this together. And the first question which everybody, including people on this panel, asked is, why did you leave the Bay Area to start an artificial intelligence company in India? So the reason is we wanted to build a different kind of company. We're not the traditional startup with a singular focus on getting one product out. We're making a horizontal play, a platform actually, and doing that without a product out there in the market is something VCs and angels would frown upon. I guess you would agree with that. And so we decided to bootstrap this ourselves. We decided to bootstrap this ourselves. And so, our few saved dollars go a longer way in India. So we came back home and we actually moved to Bangalore first and tried to set up the company over there. But for multiple reasons, Bangalore didn't work out. One of the reasons, of course, is both Ashwini and I are from Madras. We moved back with the 2.5-year-old. And now, as you mentioned, we have another kid, and it's not conducive to run a startup without a support system, especially when you have children around. And since we're both from Madras, that was one of the reasons we moved here. And surprisingly, the second reason is that hiring was difficult in Bangalore. All the kids in Bangalore are like, AI, I don't see how that's going to work. Obviously, right? I mean, it's new stuff. We're creating a category, and the kids coming in are like, I don't necessarily see this company working, or I don't understand what you're trying to do. I'll go join Flipkart or Redbus, right? So in Bangalore, we have to compete with all of those guys, and it's very hard to hire. We come here to Madras, we doubled our team within a matter of months, and of course, we can't sell this short. Madras is university town, kind of, right? You have all the universities out here. There's a higher probability of us being able to hire the kind of technical talent that we want. So we strongly believe that Madras is probably going to be better for us for a lot of reasons along those lines. Having said that, unfortunately, it's going to not meet all our needs. The kind of technology, the kind of background that I have can't be obtained here in India. So we will have an office in the Bay Area where we'll be hiring people like my ex-colleagues and people like that, people with similar backgrounds to me to help with some of the more core tech. But there are several things that go into building a company, right? There is the core tech, in our case, the AI kind of stuff that requires my kind of a background, not available here. But there's everything, including the platform, the network infrastructure, the app development, the bread and butter computer vision. All of that can be done here, and so we're hiring heavily here as well as and going to be expanding over there, and hopefully all of those will lead to a great company that Bay Area and Madras at the same time. So I guess we could do the whole valuation stuff in the question kind of stuff. So I'll stop here in terms of an introduction. If anybody has something.
Thanks, Anand. I think you gave us a pretty good idea of the nature of the business. I thought it was good to get a context before we jump into the actual valuation, because as you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and what you behold here is not yet clearly seen by many people. Whereas something that Vineet has is much more clearly seen already: preschools, restaurants, healthcare, BPO. So Vineet, over to you and your quick story.
Thanks, Chandu. So, from my academic background, I started doing hotel management. So obviously, I was not very focused on the studies. General guy, doing decent on my academics till 12th. And then we started Nawab Sheikh restaurant. Again, trying to be a little different. I'm from UP for last 5 years in Chennai, was in Hyderabad. I love eating food, and biryani was supposed to be my favorite. And biryani flavors is different in different part of the country. So we thought, why not create something which brings different flavors at one place? Again, model like Subway. And that's how we started it. We have different flavors. You have Iraqi, Lahori, Awadhi, Kolkata, Dindugul, all biryanis served at one place. Again, went to the franchise route because we understand that better now. And if you look at, and we also studied the restaurant industry, if you look at KFC and all, they are, well, they started with owning own centers, but they are raising fund to open more franchisee because it makes more sense. Your wastage is low when you are operating with a franchisee. While I was doing that, I also was running was helping someone on the healthcare side, on the healthcare BPO. Firstly with Apollo Health Street, then Technosoft, and then Global. So I launched different verticals for them, new areas to get into, new expertise to get into. So did some business development, some operations, and so that while doing that, also I was with Chandu on Chennai Angels. I thought it's important for me to, whatever experience, good or bad I had, if I can put to use to mentor startups and fund. So at Chennai Angels, I feel it's more, while funding is the core piece, but I feel more proud when we get associated with people and help them, mentor them. So there are a lot of startups that we evaluate and they are not at the right stage. We do invest time with them and help them to get to that stage and then fund them. So we have numerous case studies like that. So I think that's all I do. Yeah.
Thanks, Vineet. Srini, you know, talking about Venturies, which has a pretty diversified portfolio, and that focus on that, we'll jump into your entrepreneurial experience later. But can you just give us an idea of how a fund approaches this whole business of investing, and especially from the valuation perspective?
Just before getting into that, I just wanted to make one small thing. Between two over-intelligence guy and the artificial intelligence guy, thanks to me, the panel became average intelligent. So it started my career, but Chandu was mentioning that I become an executive and then become a entrepreneur and then become a venture capitalist. Nothing happened by plan or design, just by necessity. Just where the opportunity is there, that we jumped from one to another. That's very clear. So just over to your question. Venturies is one of the oldest venture capital fund in India. Thanks to a privatization of APIDC Venture in Andhra Pradesh in 1997, we started that. The first fund was the sector agnostic fund. It is a $10 million fund, and it was a $10 million fund, and we returned reasonably good, around 70 million. We returned to the investor. That is a very successful story. We funded around we funded close to around 22 companies. Out of that, close to 4 companies became 35x plus. That's a typical of a venture capital thing. And then we raised 3 generations of life fund focused funds, one biotech fund and then Venturies Life Fund 3. Simultaneously, we started 2 technology-oriented fund also. One with IIT Madras called Tenet Fund. There is a professor group in IIT Madras called Tenet. Here is around $10 million fund. So we are in the process of raising a round 3 for that. And there is another fund, a proactive fund, Venturies Proactive Fund, which is a $108 million fund focused more on technology things. But when you look at, when you look at what it is, the environment or ecosystem in 2008 when we started and currently now, it really it's gone very, very long story. When we started, there is no Chandu there because there is no angels, only devils like us. So we have to really get our own deal flow because investment bankers were not looking at sizes like us. We used to do it around $1 to $5 million. Whereas a typical investment banker, because of the fees, they need to really look at $25-30 million. So we need to really look at handhold the people and then really go into a incubator thing, and that was the play. We have funded companies like even a business plan to early and growth, all the 3, but we have never touched anything on the listed side. Lot of challenges. on the people side or on the technology side or on the co-investor side, all the type of challenges we face. Currently, actually, we thanks to various type things. Now the incubators have come up a long way. Seed funds have really come up thanks to angel also. A lot of angels group now. I was told by our Vichar partner Chandu, thanks to you. Actually, all the Chennai angel term sheets are even much better than the venture capital term sheets now, because I just met her in Bombay airport yesterday. So she was discussing with the term sheet of Chennai angel. The clauses and everything, it's even much better than venture capital. So thanks to you. So you understand that nuances of that make our thing easy.
Okay, I'll start with you, Srini, because what I want you to probably tell the audience here is how in the last 4-5 years has the funding ecosystem evolved and how has it impacted therefore the valuation game?
Yeah, that is one actually when you look at typically on the valuation, everybody, what we learned in art of valuation or whatever be the science and other things. So I just casually mentioned to Anand, it has become like buying a Katrika here. So winners takes all. So it is, even though you try to put various models behind the valuation, at the end of the day it becomes a real negotiation power. That's very clear. But having said that, it is not a ballpark number or something. There is some basic numbers behind that. So to get Chandu there, when we saw the startup company, for example, in 97 or even 98, we funded a company called Dodla Dairy, which is the milk distribution. We got into almost at par. Then also we got into Ocean Sparkle, which is a port management services. Again, we got into got at par and with a very mild sweat equity to the promoter. Currently, actually, even at the angel investment side, there is a premium. Even with the business plan, there is a premium. The post money is really very, very high there. Then actually the angel, definitely they help us in making the entrepreneur understand what actually the valuation is. Thanks to the angel and incubator, they are making them little grounded before coming to us. Because people expect different type of value. For example, e-commerce, when it comes to a multi-billion-dollar value, even the company starting now also expects a similar valuation there. So it all depends on the value. What is given to a Flipkart may not be given to another company. Definitely, it has some multiple things like multiple metrics and multiple parameters. What we really look at, typically there were some parameters like revenue, EBITDA, PAT, and everything. Now it is all actually it's not the word to be even talk to any entrepreneur now. So I can't even ask what is your revenue model. It is like it's become a very bad word in the venture capital now. I can't even talk revenue model, leave alone PAT or EBITDA. So having said that, then how do you really value the company? So we also evolved multiple factors there in the sense, he said, okay, I don't know how to really value you. So I'll put the ball into the next person's game. Okay, I'll put a put option there. So I'll say that I need to get a 33% IRR when a new person comes in. So I'm safe. So there is the ratchet. Maybe you call it as anti-dilution or the link to the next round of funding. So this is how actually most of the companies are getting valued in the first round. It's very, very difficult to get that first round of funding, arriving at a value at the first round of funding. That is one side, because this is a commercial side. The second side of the coin is a regulatory side. In spite of me putting a put option or something, RBI and SAMA will come that you don't have an option to have a put option. So that makes, even though it is there in the SSHA, so it is actually I will not be able to really, whether it is tenable in a court of law, it is not tenable. The Companies Act comes and says, no, actually the company law is one side, but the SSHA, which is the shareholders agreement, the other side. Recent Companies Act says that SSHA prevails upon the Companies Act. But when you go to RBI, no, we are better than the Companies Act. So put option is not allowed. So we are really got stuck. We don't know how to really value the company. So because the entrepreneur, because we have to really give that the work and the brain of that entrepreneur who have really brought that idea to the table, right? We can't really rule out that because we have to make money only with the entrepreneur's help. A lot of challenges, Chandu, but one thing is that thanks to the multiple channels of multiple methods of valuation, leave alone the top line or bottom line or mid line, all those put option and other things are saving the valuation game now.
See, if you thought software had its own set of jargon, I must tell you, when you get into fundraising, ordinary English words take on an extraordinarily new meaning. So if you are going for fundraising, one thing I would recommend is create a new dictionary. Because what you thought was put is not put. What is call is not call. Okay? Something will come with all what they call TLAs will come. That is 3-letter acronyms. All kinds of things will be thrown at you. If you heard him in these few words, he used the word called ratchet, he used put, he used call, he used SSHA, etc. So please understand that in a few lines itself, you will get confused. So coming to confusion, Anand, newbie entrepreneur, out of your mind, etc. With a name like MAD, is it short for Madras? I don't know. So how did you, get beguiled because you were seduced into getting invested in?
All of these VCs who were interested in us were opening doors. Whether they put money in us or not, they wanted to validate our business, which has no validation yet in the world, right? So they were opening doors to their portfolio companies and saying, try these guys out. So we figured, okay, fine. So the VCs have a role other than giving us money. That's step one, which is a good thing to have. And the second thing we realized as soon as those doors started getting opened is that there was tremendous interest in what we had to offer. And a lot of people are now trying us out. So by the way, all these negotiations with VCs and all, completely pre-revenue, completely pre-contract. I don't have a single contract in my hand and I'm raising money from these guys, right? Sure. And so there is precedent here, and I'll get to the precedent about the valuation. But to finish the round off, why did we raise money at this point? A, it was because the VCs were bringing credibility to us. By them opening the doors, we were a lot more credible, especially for a new piece of technology that the world hasn't seen. Second piece was now that all of those customers are potentially coming in, we had to scale fast. So our bootstrapping was meant with a certain amount of scaling, hire so many people and so on and so forth. Now I have so many customers on board, we are actually having to say, I actually don't have the bandwidth to deal with you guys right now. Can you hold please? So that's obviously not what you want to do. You'd rather scale like crazy and be able to handle everybody who's coming in to the table. So it seemed like the perfect time to raise money, and also we needed to expand back into the Bay Area, as I mentioned, so we need money for that, right? So that's why we raised the money when we raised the money, even though we planned to bootstrap as long as possible. Now, as far as the pre-revenue valuation and all that kind of stuff, the good news in our case, so obviously revenue is out of the picture. They can't use revenue to do this. How much money do you think you can make? Silence. How big is the market? The whole world. You're talking about artificial intelligence. Every vertical, every industry could possibly use it. I have no way of saying what my market size is. So why are you even asking me that? So yeah, all of the questions that would help you make a valuation are gone out of the picture, right? The only remnant was computer vision companies are being acquired. So the valuation was kind of driven, not entirely, it was kind of driven by all those exits. It was driven by the fact that 20 computer vision companies, or 30, or I don't know what the number is right now, had been acquired within a year by Google, Baidu, Facebook, so on and so forth. All the big companies are scrambling to acquire companies like us, and not for products. All the products stuck, big time. Because again, there is no product market fit properly. That hasn't been established. Their products, and some places they're making, in niche places there's some value created, but there's no real good product out there that you can hang your hat on and say that's why I acquired the company. They were acquiring them all as acqui-hires. The big companies are trying to get every machine learning scientist locked up into their companies so that eventually when somebody figures out how to build a company out of this, they have all the talent ready to duplicate it or clone it or something. So the valuation is driven by these conversations that, okay, company X, Y, and Z were acquired for 30, 50, and $60 million at this stage of maturity. So this is where we are. Okay, so here, a heavy discount on that, maybe we can give you this kind of evaluation. So those are the kind of discussions. Of course, it didn't get us too far. At the end of the day, it seemed to us that while those were good starting points, that's not what drove the valuation. I don't know if this view is shared, but it seemed to us at the end of the day, the valuation was not driven by actual value. It was driven by how much money we needed and the rough ballpark of control that every VC or angel wants for that round. And so it's completely driven by that round. Obviously, these things are a little confidential, but let's just say we got off a little better than that. Okay. But going to a very important point, which means you want the lesson for the entrepreneur is raise as much as you can because you're going to give up the same rough ballpark of control.
I think that in round one, especially, the term sheet becomes critical because once you set the base of what you are willing to give up as an entrepreneur, that is what the template that future rounds use. So please don't take the angel term sheet lightly, don't take the seed fund term sheet lightly, don't take round one investment term sheet lightly. There are 7-8 clauses, we can take it offline, but there are 7-8 clauses typically which can make you or break you. Okay, well, just leave it at that. And the second point I wanted to ask you, both you and probably you, Srini, is this funda that I'm seeing today. Like Alibaba's valuation talks with Snapdeal. Some people think that the valuations in certain sectors are bizarre today. They have crossed any limit of reasonableness. One side. So, bigger, larger question is: are companies today being built more for valuation than for value?
This is often a $1 million question. Actually, it's a capital is one of the only driver or not. That is where actually we always look at. See, currently, what we have given for our investment page, we are raising another round of fund. For that also, we are looking at this e-commerce 2.0. Because we are coming out of e-commerce 1.0. 1.0 actually it's more of a winner takes all. When you look at even in US, Amazon, eBay, there is not nobody else, and in China it is only Alibaba. Here it is only two people you can say, Flipkart and Snapdeal. So winner takes all approach very, very clearly. The other guys are not looking at. So as you rightly said, whether it is some of the valuation really puzzled us also, because when you look at the taxi guy's valuation, it is even more than to get that valuation. I need to really produce every one kid every day, because the population has to go that, and then percentage of that who are going to use the taxi over a period of 5 years, it is still higher. So I don't know really how the logic works. It is more than the revenue of the company, the multiples what they are going to get it. So leave that aside, because in the actually e-commerce 2.0, we are going to work more and more on two metrics what we are all looking, all the venture capitals are looking at. Leave alone whether we really look at the GMP of the world and other things. There are two metrics what we all wanted to do, whether the customer acquisition cost is coming down and the ARPU, which is the revenue per employee or say revenue per customer is going up. If the two metrics are met, we don't mind really looking at that company. That is the two metrics which we wanted to watch very closely. And the capital cannot be the only determining factor while funding the company. So if that is the thing, then it's only the Tiger Global and the SoftBank will survive. All the venture capital will have to really close down the shop and go. So that is not the thing there at all. And the second 2.0, we are looking at more on digital brands. So it is not a pure commodity play. We are looking at more on a digital brand, mobile, and that type of thing, which we are looking at in the second version of that.
Would agree that this craze towards valuation is currently overtaking the more mundane, sensible thing for building for value.
Absolutely, but the irony is actually we don't know whether the people who were not made money are these grapes are sour. The problem is I'm not able to get a better monkey than me. So maybe I will agree with that pinch of salt.
Okay, so till the last man holding the can is left, really holding the can, we'll have to really wait and see. Vinay, let me just, not my phone. None of us. Okay, we need. You've done multiple businesses. Health BPO. You are a co-founder, restaurants, and then you've also done Little Einstein preschool. Each of them very differently modeled. Each of them differently valued. How do you, plus I'll come to the angel bit separately, but how do you work with each of these different businesses and how did you value each of them, especially from, from multiple points? One is funding it, A. B is as a franchisor to franchisee. So to show that value even to a franchisee, because there is a valuation there, can you just explain to us, because even franchising today is supposed to be the big entrepreneur opportunity for India. We are just barely, how much, 1.3, 1.4% of GDP as opposed to US 14% of GDP franchising, correct?
Right. Okay, so I think so all the ventures have been self-funded. I think that was a conscious call that we took. Yeah, there's always a trade-off. So you get into a high scale, rapid scale, you take money and then you let go some control, and then you're forced to get into Series A, Series B, Series C, and a lot of control goes away, and we wanted to keep it very close in the family, but we wanted to scale. So what options we had was franchise it out, where we are in a way raising funds. We are making entrepreneurs invest, so it's like a crowdsourcing, right, or a way of funding. So you are reaching out to individuals who have interest in doing or getting into an entrepreneurship. You are giving them a platform so that they are successful. You are giving them all that is needed to set it up. Most of the startups fail in that initial period. If you can handhold them in that initial period, most of them will succeed, and that's the motive. So in franchisee, that's what we do, and hence we are crowdsourcing funding from entrepreneurs who have higher interest in making their own venture successful, and in turn the entire brand successful. So I think that's a basic premise. That's how we decided, and we stick to it.
So as you scale up, because even other people with the franchising models like Jubilant, for example, the Domino and all that, largest business in the food franchising, etc., has managed to go even IPO, right? So what exactly are your plans going forward in terms of scaling up to a different level, where you have your holding company being funded and you're de-risking by going to franchisees?
Right. So from a plan perspective, we are working on getting into school, just forward integrating it. And again, we want to build a school first on our own, learn it, and then start franchising it out. Again, so while you gave example of Jubilant, specifically in preschool segment, there's a company called Treehouse that went public, and they started with more of their own centers than franchisee when they were going public. But when they went public, they are concentrating more on franchisee business and growing through franchisee network, because it gives much rapid scale to grow. So I think that's the way we will continue doing it. I think when we get into school, that's when I think we will be needing a lot of support on funding, and that's when we'll look at it. As of now, I think from a preschool business perspective, I think we should be good to go to 200-250 centers in next couple of years.
Now, one of the things that people say is the best value is provided by customers in one sense, right? So when you look at your case, do you see that after you got funded barely 2 months ago, and that you acquired customers and you acquired talent also? Because one of the things people raise money for is also to get talent, because you won't have a brand name, but the funder has a brand name and you get that. Do you see that there has been a bump up in valuation just because you got funded and because you managed to get certain customers and talent?
Yeah, I think that that's a no-brainer. It's going to happen, right? By default. The fact that we are funded, in addition to getting us potential talent, the main one actually over here, and this I think is more relevant in India than maybe outside there, is that some of these companies, the bigger companies, the customers that I'm trying to acquire, are now a little bit more comfortable. They are a little bit more comfortable knowing, oh, okay, fine, you're not going to disappear in 3 months. That makes a big difference. Their conversations with us now get a certain higher cadence. Obviously, it takes a while to generate any contract or any traction with these guys, and now that becomes just that much easy because now, hey, okay, so you're going to be around for 2 years, and these guys have backed you, so okay, fine, we'll talk to you a little bit more. We're not going to dismiss you as just another startup that might disappear into. So that is a lot of value. I don't know how we can dump it on top of our valuation, but I'm sure it will have an effect if we ever talk about valuation again.
Okay, the two questions I promised I'll ask you. One is, why raise the money here? Why not in the US, which gets computer vision, AI a lot better? The valuations would have been more, number one. Number two, having raised the money in India, how did you choose these two? The two, why did you take two of them? You know, my old thing which I keep saying is penalty for bigamy is 2 mothers-in-law. Fellow doesn't want to take one funder even at Series B, you know, where you're taking 2 funders and carrying 2 monkeys at the same time. So, can you just walk us through these 2 sets of questions, please?
Sure. The first question is actually a bit easier to answer. In my specific domain, in artificial intelligence, computer vision, there is a very high premium on pedigree right now. And there are a few labs in the world that dominate all of this. So it's people who come out of those labs and create startups that have a higher probability of raising funds in the Bay Area in particular. Everybody knows whose labs these are, and that's where they come from. I don't come from that, any of those labs. I come from a different field altogether. I'm not from the machine learning labs. I come from a neuroscience background. In fact, that's kind of what we're trying to sell, right? That we have a different brand of artificial intelligence that we're trying to push. And so that's part of the thing. So we don't, when you're pre-revenue, pre-contract, all of those things, and you're simply selling an idea, pedigree matters a lot. And in the Bay Area right now, I don't have the perfect pedigree to raise this money. Neither Ashwini or I have it. So we could have raised money, not that we couldn't. That's part of it. The second aspect of that is that all of this is an experiment. And this will also lead to the other question that you asked. We're conducting a massive experiment. Computer vision isn't out there in the world right now. It isn't being used. It doesn't scale. We're talking about use cases that sometimes people have experimental waters here. And quite frankly, it's probably safer to fail in some of those experiments here in India. The negative repercussions of an experiment failing in the Bay Area might be larger. So India, I strongly think that India is going to keep leapfrogging technology. Okay, so we've always been behind, right? Lagging the West. But that's going to rapidly change because instead of going through the same growth path that they did in terms of acquiring and using technology in a particular way, they're just going to jump past it. And so we're talking about technology here, which could potentially leapfrog how businesses are built up and how they're adding value through things similar to analogous to what we would be doing. And so we can try out those experiments with a lot less risk over here. So some of the applications that we come up with our partners are going to fail. And that's a reality that has to be faced by any funding agency, any angel who's coming in to fund a company like ours. Half of our experiments, or maybe even more, are going to fail. So that kind of is where I leave the why India part and go on to why these guys, people willing to accept that we're doing an experiment and are willing to give us the runway and not focus on revenue because for us to get our customers right now, I'm giving them deep discounts, if you want to put it that way, right? I could go a steady add value. Okay, you give me, run my company like a SaaS company saying, hey, you pay me for so many API calls. Check, can work. It's an existing revenue model. People can do that. Not necessarily going to work in convincing them to try an experimental technology with an existing revenue model. So the ability for me to be flexible with my revenue model was very key. to how we're going to push this technology out there. In some cases, giving it away free, saying, okay, I don't really care about getting a SaaS kind of revenue. I actually want the data that this is going to generate, and I will figure out how to monetize that later. So all kinds of different experiments, from the revenue model, from the technology, so many different experiments, and the funding agency has to be okay with us doing those experiments. And these two guys are ready to do that, and some of the other guys who were close to funding us were not necessarily.
So there are two takeaways I'm getting.
Yeah.
Who you are today seems to matter more than what you have, number one, many times. And number two, who you bed is more important than what kind of bed they have. So, I mean, in one way, I'm putting it very simply, but that seems to be very this thing, because if you look at the background of Xfinity Fund, which is one of the funds, they're all professionals who worked in pretty large companies, iFlex, Wipro, Infosys, etc., who come from a very with a global kind of a background, and I will not get into details of that. But what I would just ask, therefore, somebody like Srini to answer is, a couple of things. One, that in such a case, when the uncertainty levels are so high, how do you convince your LPs, your limited partners, your investors into your fund that look, you're taking such a call?
See, I recall a party which has happened in Tamil Nadu. When he started the party, he announced the exit date also. I think Mr. P. Chidambaram, sometime back he started some 21 days, something there. So we also do the similar thing, because when we wanted to invest in these type of companies, we don't look at what is the current day's worth. Thanks to our ecosystem, we talk to the potential strategic guys and look at engage with them, and then look at what is the potential there. So once we get the comfort there, then it's easier, lot more easier for us to, because most of the VCs, they don't have that technical expertise to really understand that. So we need the third party potential acquirer to assess and then value that company. Once that is done, then it is easier for us to go and talk to the LP. And sometimes actually we will be lucky, and some of the LPs will co-invest along with us. Not in this first round, even the second round, they would like to look at it. That is the method of evaluation.
Yeah, just to add to that, of course. Obviously these guys didn't just invest in us based on our word. They did their due diligence, bought in people to particularly do a technical evaluation of whether we are capable of delivering on some of these goods, right? So definitely did happen. One other thing I wanted to add, the guys who did not invest in us are actually very good friends. They're still opening doors for us. In fact, our first contract that I've signed, of course I can't mention any names or who or whatever it is, came from one of the people who did not invest. An introduction made by a fund that did not invest in this round, right? And so all of these guys are like, we're not comfortable with the risk level right now, but we are happy to continue opening doors, and maybe we'll come in the next round.
There is the other thing which I've seen over the last few years is the importance of keeping the network alive. Number one, don't go to a person 3 months just before you require the funds. Go to them when you don't need the funds. So you start the process significantly earlier, be pally with them, meet them here and there, but don't ever reveal. In the sense, say hi, but don't give details. They don't meet analysts, junior, never. Don't allow that to happen, because the more you are out in the market and nothing happens, it's bad news. So the first thing is to keep that network alive, and the second thing is also to decide which fellow you will go after. Please use a sharpshooter approach, don't use a machine gun approach, because not all funds are equal, not all funds are interested in the type of company you are. I wanted to ask you, in this process of negotiation, did you use an intermediary to do a lot of these things, both of you as entrepreneurs, or did you do it yourself? It's like this. You are a nubile nymphette. And you're a nubile nymphette, very young, inexperienced, versus a very experienced sugar daddy on the other side, who knows all the clauses, all the words. How do you avoid getting into a trap?
So while I might be new to the entrepreneurial game, I'm not a kid out of college. So, and there's Google. And VC term sheets and everything are analyzed and, exhaustively on Google. Do your research. It's, I mean, there's tons of data out there that you can do before you go into those negotiations. So everything they threw at us was familiar because we had done our research. And even the common wisdom, okay, this is what will happen in India, this is what will happen in the Bay Area, was out there. It's out, it's available. People have written tons about it. It doesn't necessarily translate for every situation, but it wasn't that difficult to connect the dots.
You're talking about him, we haven't met Ashwini, who actually says runs the business. She's more a UX, UI type of person, right? By the way, I must just tell you something. I wanted to crack this in the beginning. And by the way, I've also forgot to say Happy Ugadi to all of you here. So, what this company does, object recognition, gaze tracking, emotion expression detection, head and facial gestures. When I read this, I said equals to wife. Okay. But he calls it artificial intelligence. So, small. Okay. So coming back to you, Vineet, when you're talking to a franchisee, how do you show them that this is the amount that they have to spend on a franchise outlet like this? How do you show them that this valuation that you're putting on that is really viable, makes sense for them?
I think initially it was tough to convince. Once you have case study and references, it works out. Because you have proven model, you have seen month on month, how does it behave doing certain activities, how your cash flow increases, how your brand increases, what all is needed to get that. In the start, we ran it, and both the preschool or the restaurant, we ran it ourselves just to get the hang of the things. And understand the nuances, and there are a lot of transactional issues, if you will, that happen. So on prima facie it looks very simple, straightforward. You do this, XYZ, you'll get this much. But to understand the nuances and be able to help the franchises when they face that, I think becomes critical, and hence the reason for us to do it first, learn it, trial and error, whatever is there on Google or competitors, what they're doing it, do the entire analysis and figure out the right way, right model, and then go out on franchisee and then explain them, try to be market competitive. Again, in both the cases, there are a lot of data points that is available in the market. There are numerous competition, similar models and all. So it's easier to convince them. Till the time they believe in you. I think it works both for franchisee as well as when we look for angel investment in a company. I think I follow for angel investment, it's called team. Team is basically team, environment, alternatives available in the market, and model. Similar, my main focus in angel investing again is the team. So I start with a team, the entire thing is a team. So I would rather bet on the person. And if there is a strong pedigree, I'm pretty sure, and that's what happens. A lot of time course correction, and major course correction happens when you start up. So you start up with a different goal, different product, different model, but 6 months, 7 months later, there are course correction that happens. And if you have the right guy, high ethic, high integrity, good pedigree or experience, I think most of the time I'll bet on it. On the team, how are the co-founders associated with each other, what's the chemistry between them and all that.
Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Pranshu Dubey, Infallible Technologies. Actually, I'm trying to understand, I think it may not be enough for me to attend one session and understand how to properly evaluate the valuation criteria and how to evaluate a company. But I've been following the Flipkart and Snapdeal story, and what I understand is that both of them probably started quite around a similar time frame, but the way they are pursuing the business is quite different. Flipkart is more towards value driven and like focusing more on their logistics chain and process excellence, and Snapdeal is more towards giving more I think deals where they are actually losing more than actually earning. Sure. So my question is like, we keep talking about Flipkart and Snapdeal, but what I see is like Snapdeal is not really up to the standards of what Flipkart has been like in like Amazon or any other good e-commerce company. So like I really don't see Snapdeal having valuations like what they did initially to secure the initial funding, and then eventually like they keep.
You don't understand the valuation of Snapdeal versus Flipkart.
Exactly.
He doesn't understand Flipkart's valuation also.
You made my thing easier. So is the case saying, say what does actually one of my friend who funded a company called Nexus, I often bounce that question to the CFO, how do you really look at the Snapdeal thing? He gives the same thing, right? Don't look at the total number in that company, really look at where the company is growing, that whether the customer acquisition cost is coming down and the average realization per unit is going up. If that is the answer, just keep on funding it. So it is like holding a tiger's tail. So you can't leave it. So
Suresh will talk about metrics like, monthly run rate, cost of customer acquisition. You can ask him all those good questions. Dore is also going to spearhead it, because that in my view, that session should have preceded this, which is really the, the business model and pivoting really actually should have preceded this, because that would have set a context for some of what we are discussing now. Any one or two questions, I'll close it. Yes, please. Second last question. One more and then I will close.
Yeah, if you have a technology-based startup, does having an IPR, helps you to IPR, like if you're holding a patent, so does it help to, for the funding and, raising funds?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't hold any patents.
No, but
we are in
it
the
will.
process, but yes, if we had patents, it would have helped.
But at the same time, having dealt with patents for many years as a patent researcher company and all that, let me tell you that 0.2% only of patents have been monetized.
That's right. So, as a tech company, most of what we do are still in the realm of trade secrets. We will eventually make them patents, but that's an important part of a company. I'm not selling that short at all. But there's a time and a place for it in the path of a company. You don't necessarily have to invest too much money into patents too early. There are people
But
are fine
reveal
with them
also,
being
it's not
trade
reveal
secrets.
too much in advance, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I think funding agencies are fine with them remaining trade secrets for a little longer than.
This is like a marriage.
Actually, the tech piece is actually fairly straightforward. I can reveal the product without revealing the tech. So we have proof of concepts, we have prototypes, and all those kind of things. They bring in technical evaluators to talk to me to make sure I'm not smoking something, and I know what I'm talking about, without talking about any of the details. Okay, so I will not reveal anything about my trade secrets, but they can very easily check to see whether I know what I'm talking about in terms of the technology space. My pedigree is valid. They know that I understand the technology, the algorithms, what other people are doing. It can be evaluated without me revealing a single secret. That's what
It is like cooking. Do you know how to cook? Do you know what a kitchen looks like? You don't have to tell me the exact recipe of how you make, say, your special rasam. Okay, so with that, thank you so much, guys. I know there are lots more questions on valuation. Srini, Vineet, and this one, Anand. I always confuse him with Ashokan. So thanks so much. Great session.